Hello, everybody. A nice crowd of people. Welcome to this very special event at The Edge, the 2022 presentation of the Telstra Creativity and Innovation Series hosted by the NGV. My name is Ewan McKeown. I'm the Hugh Williamson Senior Curator of Contemporary Art, Design and Architecture at the National Gallery of Victoria. I'd like to begin by acknowledging the Wurundjeri Woiwurrung people as the traditional owners of the land upon which we are meeting, and pay my respects to their elders, past and present, and also to any other Aboriginal elders of other communities that may be here with us this evening. And of course, we acknowledge that all advertising and design takes place on Indigenous land in this country. The NGV'S Telstra Creativity and Innovation Series is a unique opportunity to hear from world-leading creatives working across the fields of art, design and technology each year. The NGV is very proud to partner with Telstra on this annual event, which brings into focus how creativity, the engine of innovation, is fundamental to delivering transformational thinking, practices, systems and products, which inspire and help us to do things differently and better. Powered by imagination, human creativity emerges from the sharing of ideas, knowledge and experiences, and it connects people in the belief that we can move beyond the realm of what is to what could be. And when creative capacity is put to work for the benefit of culture, people, society, business and the environment, it reveals how imagination makes humans exceptional. Yet we often need to remind ourselves of this. That is why for tonight's delivery of the 2022 Telstra Creativity Innovation Series event, we draw on the success of the Rigg Design Prize 2022 and the exhibition theme, Creative Potential. This is the first major exhibition of advertising and communication design in the NGV's history. And in doing so, we asked 8 leading Australian advertising agencies how creativity makes a difference. So we invited 8 agencies and we challenged them to develop campaigns that articulate, because we wanted an even sort of playing field, and we wanted to take advantage of all the free work we could get out of you people. We asked them to develop campaigns that articulate the potential for creativity to accelerate positive social, cultural, economic or environmental change. The campaigns on display represent a call to action for Australian society to realise its creative potential. So of course the proposition is simple. Creativity is the glue that binds together science, technology, engineering, maths, economics. It's what creates disruption, it's where we find innovation, it's actually what makes us who we are culturally but also economically and socially. But it's a talent, a capability that we would put to you is undervalued in our country. So if you've not seen the exhibition, which is up on level 3 of NGV Australia here at Fed Square, and encourage you to do so, it's open till the 29th of January. So highlighting design's role in influencing human behaviour insofar as it can influence the way we think, feel and act in the world, the Rigg exhibition draws attention to a creative field that works in the space, bringing together teams of creative people with different skills and expertise, including art directors, graphic designers, typographers, digital media specialists, analysts, strategists, psychologists, and writers, to name a few. So these are the people that normally come together to sell you stuff, so they're selling you creativity tonight. Tonight we have the tremendous opportunity to hear from a senior team member from each of the 8 creative agencies in the Rigg Design Prize. Our speakers tonight represent Australian offices of multinational and also independent creative agencies. And they are Clemenger BBDO Melbourne, DDB Group Melbourne, Frost Collective from Sydney, Galimba from Brisbane, Leo Burnett Australia, recipients of the Rigg Design Prize 2022, congratulations, TBWA Melbourne, the Royals and Tinkerbell, both Melbourne. Drawing on their experiences in business, advertising and the creative sector, our speakers will deliver a snappy, high-impact presentation, at least that was the brief. Each will argue for the potential of creativity in shaping Australia's future, sharing with us a wide range of ideas, beliefs, and philosophies. But for now, I'd like to thank our sponsor by asking Brent Smart, Chief Marketing Officer of Telstra, to the stage to say a few words before we get underway this evening. Please make him feel welcome.
Thank you. Very pleased to welcome everyone tonight on behalf of Telstra. It promises to be an inspirational evening, and who doesn't need a bit of creative inspiration on a Monday night? Telstra's been a proud partner of the NGV for 8 years. It's a partnership we value because we both share a passion for exploring the intersection between technology and creativity. The Telstra Creativity Innovation Series is testament to that. We've had 8 years of memorable speakers, and tonight promises to be no exception as we hear from 8 of the best creative agencies in the land. Advertising legend Dave Trott said, "Creativity is not aesthetics, it is a ruthless mindset that changes context to solve problems." And as a marketer, I believe that creativity is the means to solve business problems, customer problems, and to drive growth. If you're a chief marketing officer or any business executive or any business owner and you want growth, you need creativity. And if you need creativity, you need to look outside of your own company and your own category for inspiration. I believe it's critical to look at what's happening in culture because it's way more creative than what's happening in business. And for me, an important source of outside creative inspiration comes from advertising agencies. I spent 20 years working in ad agencies, and I'm a massive believer that they are the creative weapon for marketers. Unrivaled when it comes to creative problem solving with very hard commercial briefs with lots of constraints from clients. Tonight, we see the work of agencies with a less constrained brief, and we see the creative potential when we unleash our agencies. Congratulations to Leah Burnett, who won this pitch. Well done. And congratulations to all the agencies for finding the time to create tonight's work, despite dealing with briefs from CMOs with unrealistic business expectations, not enough money, and absolutely no time. On behalf of Telstra, thanks again to the NGV. Thank you to all the agencies for your hard work, and thank you all for coming out. Cheers.
Just lower those down a bit. Thank you, Brent. It's great to have someone give a response who actually really understands what they're talking about. I really appreciate it. You can tell, can't you? It just comes through. I'd like to thank all the partners who've been involved in making tonight possible. In addition to Telstra, tonight is supported by Fed Square and Yering Station. And I would also like to thank the Rigg Design Prize major partner Deakin University and Vice Chancellor Professor Ian Martin, and major supporter the Cecily and Colin Rigg Bequest, who underwrite the Rigg Design Prize. Now, it's my great pleasure to introduce our MC for tonight, Hilary Harper, whose role is to keep the presentations moving along and to present our speakers, and by asking them a few questions that will follow each presentation tonight. While many of you will know Hilary, I'm going to give you a little short snapshot. Hilary presents Life Matters on ABC Art Radio National. Before then, she presented the statewide Saturday morning show for 10 years and prepared traffic reports for Red Simons and John Fain, which sounds really horrible. So tonight we are in Hilary's most capable hands, I'm sure. She's good at traffic management and time management, no doubt. And Hilary, we're most grateful for you being here with us tonight. And before I hand over to Hilary, I'd just like to say thank you again to all of the people who've prepared their presentations for tonight, and for all of you for coming out and joining us. Hilary, take it away. Thank you.
Thank you, Ewan. Time management, traffic management, you forgot ego management. That did come into it quite a bit with Red Simons and John Fain, I have to say. So this is basically a giant theatre sports situation. I did lobby for a dance fight, but I was overruled, so you can be the judge of who was right there. Each speaker will have 5 minutes to convince us of their call to arms, and I'll ask them a couple of questions afterwards because I'm basically the Greek chorus helping give some perspective and, you know, a bit less bloodshed, a bit less of a downer, but that's the basic idea. And their goal is to, convince us, persuade us, that's their job after all, and promote ongoing discussion. So I'm going to leave that up to you. That could be a bit of rhubarb, or it could be total uproar. Who can say? Our first speaker, Daniel Pizzato, from he's creative group head with Clemenger BBDO. They're one of the most venerable agencies around, as you know, and their campaign is called Creativity Was Here. It's got everything from dentistry to dogs. Daniel, the stage is yours.
Oh, that's a lovely welcome. I didn't even have to do the dance fight, which I'm open to. Good evening, everyone. I think they might rue putting me up first tonight because I want to start in a bit of a dark place. I want to talk about problems. Yours, mine, ours, and I know what you're thinking, but he's only got 5 minutes. This is true. So I've created the world's grimmest slideshow to go behind me as I speak. Off we go. The world is full of problems. If you look at the world around us, it's easy to think we're in an utter mess. We live in a society scarred by inequality, division, environmental calamity, the repercussions of a global pandemic. I mean, 90s fashion is back, but this time it's come with mullets. The situation's dire. And while some of these problems are simple, most of them are extraordinarily complex and deeply interconnected. Problems feeding problems. But this is where things start to look up. Because while most people and most industries don't like problems, creatives and creativity loves them. It's just us and divorce lawyers. And the more complex they get, the more interested we are. And this is very fortunate for society because it turns out that the creative mind is exceptional at solving complex problems because of its ability to generate novel ideas. Novel ideas. We often make the mistake of thinking that creativity is an output. A pair of Air Force Ones, Beyonce's Lemonade, an iPhone. But as Steve Jobs himself put it, creativity is connecting things. Creativity is about joining disparate dots in a way that other people don't think to. And it's this ability that enables creativity to drive transformative change in a way that's outside the wildest dreams of incrementalism. I'm not going to linger on this for too long, but our entry to the Rigg, Creativity Was Here, deals with this same argument, but using the clarity of hindsight. Our exhibition showcases solutions that have already become meaningful in our lives today, but we don't attribute to creativity. And it inserts creativity back into the narrative of those things by revealing the deeply creative connections that lay underneath each of them. So a little jazz solving aviation mysteries, trench warfare opening up communications for the visually impaired, or a party high giving birth to modern anesthetics. So creativity does have a history of transformative change, a history of being an agent of positive change in our society. But for them to do this, it needs certain things. And notepads out, Papa's about to get preachy. I want to welcome you to what I'm calling the creativity food pyramid, or what we have to feed creativity for it to sort our shit out. All right, down the bottom, the largest food group is problems. And as I've said, creativity hungers for problems. And thankfully, it's the one truly renewable resource in this country and elsewhere. If we do ever run out, though, we can just call my mum. She's always got a few irons in the fire in that respect. But this is where creativity starts to bring value, because creativity begins by taking problems and reframing them as challenges. It's one of creativity's gifts, because it inserts hope and possibility into the equation. And that's really, really important. Another one of creativity's gifts is that it's omnivorous in this respect. It can be applied to any problems in any sector. Next up, we have resources. This one comes to all of you. Creativity needs time and space, which means a little bit of these ones. It's not a linear process. Creativity is unpredictable, it's irregular, it's paradoxical. For instance, studies have showed that the most potent and effective creative thinkers often have a lot of bad ideas before they get to the truly brilliant ones. And that a moderate amount of procrastination actually aids creativity. So it's important to make sure as a society we're giving them those resources, we're feeding them those resources. I will acknowledge here, because I'm sure someone will ask about it, creativity can thrive without a wealth of resources, but it doesn't really make for very well-balanced individuals. Trust me on that one. Creative people really are better off when they can afford to eat and sleep indoors and afford their own Netflix password. Next up, we have receptivity. We need to feed creativity an open and receptive mind. For instance, if you've got 12 Thai boys and their soccer coach trapped in a flooded cave system, you need to be open to the idea that the best and safest way to get them out is to drug them with ketamine, cuff their hands behind their back, throw them in scuba gear even though none of them have ever dived before, and dive them out semi-conscious. So in this way, creativity and our attitude as a society towards creativity will shape our country's future. But this is problematic because studies and research into implicit bias have repeatedly shown that as a society, we harbour visceral implicit aversions to creativity and to creative people. I really enjoyed a recent study that I read out of the University of Illinois. And in that, they found that people had strong associations between creativity and negative things like vomit and poison. I kid you not, agony was actually one of the other ones. And the studies in this area have traced these negative associations and this bias to the fact that the fundamentally disruptive nature of creativity. Creativity means change, but without the certainty of positive results. And as a society, we don't like change and we don't like uncertainty. But I'm telling you now, we need to get used to both of those things, because if we don't, it will discourage us from hiring creative people, it will discourage us from undertaking creative projects, and it will discourage us from funding creativity, even though we know that all of those things are hugely effective in solving our problems. Last up, at the very top of is this little pointy bit that I'm calling the creative BYO buffet. You don't need to do anything here. These are all of the things that creative people bring to the table themselves that have been proven to aid creativity. Up here are things like self-doubt, diversity of life experience, and IBS. That last one is anecdotal, but prove me wrong, seriously. I'm out of time, so the doggy bag I'm going to send you home with for the creativity food pyramid is this. The world is full of complex problems, and we need creativity to solve them. And to do this, my nonna would love what I'm about to say, we need to become feeders. We need to feed creativity problems that it can metabolize into challenges. We need to feed it resources to enable these to digest. And then we need to feed it a palate that is receptive to a different flavor of idea. If we do this, what we get in return is a future that is plump with possibility, plump with hope, and probably some really sick new iPhones. Thank you.
So clearly I was wrong about the amount of bloodshed. It was quite high.
It did start high.
Yeah. I want to ask you, I mean, clearly we're fine with the problems, but if creativity is irregular and paradoxical and hard to pin down, and we hate creatives, how do we harness this stuff? I mean, apart from getting your mum on board.
She's a big advocate of creativity. I think that as a society we need to be conscious of our bias against creativity, and we need to get comfortable with uncertainty and change. And I think people in this current environment are very risk averse from a business perspective. So we need to acknowledge that and be willing to take a leap and entrust it to the people that are best placed to help us in those circumstances, which are creative people.
Can we detach our hatred of creativity from individual people? Can we somehow go, creativity is good, don't look at where it's coming from?
I think it would be hard to do. I think they're intertwined. I think that, there's creativity in everyone, but there are, I think, people who have spent their life honing that skill and have had resources invested in them growing it. So you probably want to put your money behind that horse, but generally I think they're very intertwined.
This is sounding very pro-advertising. I don't know where that came from. Daniel, thank you. You are free to go. All right, Patsy number 2. Giles Watson is the creative director at DDB Melbourne. Now, they say that they only hire people who are both talented and nice, which must make job interviews some kind of psychometric obstacle course. Their campaign is called the Creative Index.
Hello. So we created the Creative Index at DDB, and we made it for one reason And that is because we believe the potential of creativity is to become Australia's greatest natural resource. It has the potential to answer any problem we have. It's sustainable, there's infinite amounts of it. But the problem is that we can't give it a value. Unlike this piece of coal here, we kind of dig it out of the ground, put it on a scale, weigh it, and sell it for the lowest or highest price we can find. It's magic in a bottle. And it's subjective. This drawing that my 3-year-old drew for me the other day, whilst I find it quite valuable, I don't know if many people here would share the same sentiment. If you do, come see me after. But creativity, when used and harnessed by business, it's proven to become the most powerful force on Earth. And as represented by Apple, obviously the most profitable company in the world, and the most exciting companies of our time are using creativity to enforce what they do. And that's because, and what we learnt by doing the Rigg Design Brief, was creativity is not just art, music. It's creative thinking, it's problem solving, it's finding new ways to combat different ideas. It's the most powerful force in business, as shown by Apple. So how do we talk to and show the value of creativity to businesses in Australia, ones where we do really value the financial figure, and that's to talk in that language, in money, which is why we created the Creative Index. Here's a video. So now creativity is a commodity with a dollar value, a value I can't even read, something around, at the last time I checked, $579 billion. What does that mean? This index is made up of companies on the ASX. It's grouped together with our investment partner, Jarden. And it's not just companies that you would think of as creative. It's not the Apples, just the Apples of, well, not Apple, just the Apples or innovative companies of the world. It's ones like Coles, like Channel 9, A2 Milk, Seek, Cochlear. Every company, traditional or not, that is utilising and harnessing innovation within their own business to help them grow. Treasury Wine gave us a lovely anecdote the other day about how they utilise creativity in their own way. And that is a story around when Australia and China had issues with importing and exporting wine. To get around that, they worked with the Chinese government to grow the first vineyard in China and sell wine from the inside out. So what does this actually do? How does this help? It's, at the core of it, shifting creativity from a hallway discussion and ethereal concept into a boardroom measure, one that can be used by the C-suite, not just marketing departments. It's something that we can use as a bit of something to work towards as a goal, as something to look inward at ourselves if we're doing the right thing. And what now? So launching at the NGV, obviously, but what we have to do to make Australia's greatest natural resource something like creativity, or something that creativity can help with, is make it as big as possible within culture. So whether that be companies using that in their own annual reports, job advertising saying that they're part of the Creative Index. This index becomes a badge of pride, the same way that you might share, a company might share the Heart Foundation tick of approval. If you're on the index, be proud of it, share it, show it, make the creativity as big as possible, and continue the conversation that it is something worth value, so that one day in a parliament near us, something other than coal will be held up in front of us. Thank you.
Found that very interesting, because I wonder how you measure creativity. How does someone get on the index other than, creating a cochlear implant? Is it about the impact on people or something else?
Well, luckily it's not up to us advertising agencies to make that measure, but that's why we worked with investment group Jarden. So they created a bar, a level, based a lot around R&D spend, but also other factors that they can probably talk to you more than a mere ad mortal. But once this company makes it on the index, they're not always on for life. So if they're not performing in the way that the measure demands, they get taken off, which is why it's important that they continue to show and value creativity within their own business.
Well, I was wondering what the logical end of this. Are we going to see, mandatory creativity KPIs, people being shamed on Twitter for creativity deficits? How far could we go?
Well, who knows? And I'm excited to find out. That's where this idea gets exciting, is to see what happens now that it's in the public. How big can we get it? Can we get someone shaming people on Twitter? Probably not, and I wouldn't want that. But
it's pretty easy.
It's quite easy.
Cool. All right. I too am interested. Thank you, Giles.
Thank you.
Our next speaker is Natalie Smith, Head of Brand at Frost Collective. Now, they're B Corp certified, indicating that they support an inclusive, equitable and regenerative economy. I think you'll be able to see the halo through the backlighting, but just tell me if you have any problems. Their campaign is called Any Ideas. Natalie, welcome.
Well, you stole my introduction. I was going to talk about how we're a B Corp to begin, but now I'm going to talk about the UN. And something that the Secretary-General said last week, which was that we're hurtling towards climate crisis. Well, we're right there, aren't we? Climate hell, and we've still got one foot on the gas. I am really excited to speak about the way that our creative community and industry can hopefully help to solve that and work against that, leveraging the knowledge, the strategies, the insights that we're also adept at creating to hopefully keep us all alive. Now, I have to note, my fonts are gone, and I'm the only person that will mention this, but as a design sort of agency, I had to call it out. At least it's not Comic Sans. I won't be fired. James Baldwin is one of my favourite writers. He's an American writer. He writes a lot about the Black experience, and he said, not everything that is faced can be changed, but nothing can be changed until it is faced. I think even though we should be talking about the climate crisis, every day we stop. And I think what we're trying to do at Frost is very much embedded into our work and start to shift the narrative from helping businesses. I've been very lucky to work with all sorts of large corporate things, sell lots of phones and lots of deodorant and a horrible amount of alcohol over my career. But I think we're seeing a flip. And we're seeing a lot of energy about using all of the knowledge that we have to create change and hopefully to create a planet that we're all able to exist on. It's a pretty powerful catalyst, and it's a pretty powerful kind of potent opportunity and resource that we can use. I think what it enables us to do is to change behaviours, to change minds, to change perceptions, and to change outcomes. And I suppose one of the most interesting examples of this for me is the work of a PR agency who will remain unnamed, but who coined the phrase climate change. And that was at the behest of BHP. I think that tells us a lot about the way that big money has been used to shift our perceptions and frame the way that we work in the world. So we're trying to fix it. Good guy, David Attenborough, talks about this. I think we all know that we have all of the tools that we need to fix the problem that we find ourselves in. We have powerful Indigenous knowledge that can help with regenerative agriculture. We understand what an electric vehicle is, even though we're the massive backrunner to uptake of that. We know how to sequester carbon. We know all the things that we need to do, but we're not doing it. It's pretty urgent. We're thinking about it a lot in the business that I work in. And we kind of have these 5 principles for creativity and action that we like to build into every piece of work that we do. The first is thinking about climate. We think about it every day. We think about it in every brief we work in, and we all should be. I recently was lucky enough to visit Bundanon, if anyone has been. It's not quite as good as the NGV, but I would say that right now. It was designed by Kestrel Scott Architects, and she did an incredible job in what I think is the definitive kind of experience around climate and driving that discussion. It's on the south coast of New South Wales. It's home to Arthur Boyd's collection of, $30 million worth of art. It's also in a place where there's not only bushfires, but there are multiple floods every year. So the building that you see here and the experience that visitors have is fireproof. It's also elevated so that when the floods do come, it doesn't impact the art. But what it does is make people think and talk about the climate crisis that we exist in. We also think a lot about designing by collective or with a collective. Frost Collective, it's kind of in the name. We love to work together, we love to work with others, and we also love to work with people who are outside of the creative industry. As clever as we all are, there's something quite empowering about working with physicists, with ethicists, and with other different proponents. We've even recently worked with a perfumer, which was quite incredible. This was the theme that we explored for our exhibition, which was really all about democratising creativity. We wanted to bring and connect the Australian people, who often think, I could have fixed that, and talk about it, with some of the businesses that we work with. So Acon, who's almost eradicated AIDS in Australia, with Oz Harvest, with Greenpeace, with B-Lab, WWF. It was less about creating a campaign and more about creating the connection and enablement for people to share and solve the problems that we're all facing together. There it is. Oh, I better hurry. Designing with diversity, we think about this a lot. We think about the fact that Indigenous knowledge, that different neurodiverse principles, we think about gender and ethnicity and socioeconomic backgrounds, how those discussions and how having those people around the table can make sure that we are creating better outcomes, better ideas. This is an example from Google Arts and Culture, captures a ton of Indigenous languages globally into an AI experience that I won't go into because there's a big flashing red light. Designing with courage, weird case study, but I'm really excited about this. Everyone's seen the Just Stop Oil campaign, and you will have seen it off the back of the soup throwing onto the Van Gogh. I'm really interested in it because it's a ton of teenagers doing something they care about, but I also really like to hire their creative director. I think it's a masterclass in classic brand principles and in marketing science. Someone's read Byron Sharp. Everything's orange. There are consistent brand assets everywhere. And there's also an incredibly powerful kind of capturing of cultural and iconic imagery, which has meant they have been on the front cover of every broadsheet around the world with no media budget. Designing with consideration is my final kind of principle. It's something that we like to fold into our work. And I suppose it's all back to what we're all doing, which is trying to solve problems. It's about thinking. I was thinking the other day about how many ships travel around the world with plastic bottles of fizzy drink from Coca-Cola and Pepsi. And I love this example. It's by a studio called Made Thought. I thought it was an incredibly elegant, jazzy Baroque answer to a huge problem that will solve many other problems. It's really just a bath bomb that goes into your water, but it means that we can eradicate so much use of plastic, so much carbon being emitted through shipping, and I think that's a really important thing to think about around solving problems. That's it. These are the things we're thinking about, these are the things we should all be thinking about, and these are the things that will drive change. Thank you. Oh.
I do love this idea of democratising change, that everyone has some creativity inside them, though I will say some people are hiding it very well. What kind of structural change would we need to make sure that there is that diversity, of the talent pool, that everyone has a chance to express their creativity?
I think that's a great question. There's a really cool organisation in London called the Brixton Finishing School, and I think a lot of the problem is from a pipeline perspective. So, advertising is often white, often male, often middle class and above. And I think if we create systems to kind of feed and bring people of more diverse backgrounds in, it will go a long way.
So how would you do that? I mean, just a very quick off-the-cuff question about, from your experience in advertising agencies, what kind of atmosphere would it take to go, you're welcome here?
I think it's an active choice. I think it's about paid internships and respectful structures, but it's definitely an investment and something that we all need to make a choice about. It doesn't just happen. Worth it, though.
Maintains B Corp certification for another year. Thank you, Natalie.
Thank you, guys.
David Williams is Executive Director and Artist with Galimba, which is 100% Indigenous owned, and they are all about connection. Their campaign has quite big aims for us as a collective, as a nation, as a society. It's called Unlearn the Untruths. David, welcome.
Thanks very much. Thanks very much, Hilary. As a matter of cultural protocol, I would like to begin by acknowledging country, acknowledging the lands on where we are here this evening. And I do so with much pride, respect and recognition of country. It's very important for us as Aboriginal people to connect and acknowledge the land that we are passing through, because as a business, we are doing business with wider Australia, but as we have done for thousands of years, we are trading, we're sharing knowledge, we are connecting and sharing cultures. And it's an absolute pleasure to do so here this evening at the NGV. And I've got to say, this popcorn situation, deadly, too deadly. It's a big thumbs up from me, because we need to get you mob out here on a Monday night. And I don't know, I've never had popcorn at the NGV on a Monday night. So Tony, good work on that, mate. And yeah, so, but I'd also like to acknowledge Marcus Lee from Marcus Lee Creative, Marcus Lee Design, who has been someone who I've admired over many years as an Indigenous designer who has really been part of this movement to be able to put the stories of our people out into the mainstream as an ability for non-Indigenous Australians to connect with our culture, who we are, effectively a storytelling mechanism. And I'm going to share with you some of the concepts behind our Rigg entry, and with a couple of thoughts, I guess, for each and every one of you to take away here this evening. But it starts with that brand mark. This is not a big noting exercise for Glimba. As a creative agency, it's going to place relevance to who we are and what we do. Okay, so Glimba, in my grandmother's language, in Waka Waka language, simply means today. Okay, so the idea behind that is we have the stories of our old people of yesterday, passing down through generations as a dynamic culture, oral traditions, to today, because it's what we do today that has an impact on tomorrow. But with this, it's Indigenous culture. It's a creative agency. We are sharing this, collaborating, connecting with non-Indigenous Australians and beyond the shores of this country. Through learning, sharing and celebrating culture, what we are doing is connecting, coming together today, and in language, we simply say Galimba. So in Aboriginal way, I'll introduce myself. My grandmother's language, Waka Waka language, where we talk, where we speak, where our feet are placed on the ground, we connect and acknowledge two very wonderful elders who I've had the pleasure of knowing and getting to, I guess, call family over the years, Auntie Joy Murphy and Auntie Carolyn Briggs. Now, you'll notice I'm not wearing shoes. It's not because I forgot to get dressed properly on the way here. It's that connection to country as we do as Aboriginal people. It's that feet connection to land. So we are walking, talking and making pathways to share and celebrate our culture in a way that is accessible to the wider community. As a creative agency, we're driven by the power and process of storytelling and the role that this has right across the country as a celebration of culture and community. I'm going to start with a quote here, a quote from Nova Peris. When you acknowledge us as Aboriginal people, when you value us, you don't lose your 230 years of history, but you gain 500,000 years of history. So our design entry, Unearth the Untruths, is aimed at all those people who have grown up believing that they are not creative. We want to urge them to re-engage with their creativity and think differently about their surroundings and what it means to be Australian. We want the audience to know that there is nothing mysterious about creativity because it is a way of perceiving the world around us, examining what we find and seeing the connections. And just like with creativity, we want Australia to see there's nothing mysterious about Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander histories, peoples and cultures that are at the heart of our nation. In this country, the oldest continuing living culture on the planet is all around us. We've been here for tens of thousands of years and continue to evolve and thrive, but there remains a hidden culture to so many in this country. So add to this the fact that so many Australians' true history has been misrepresented or ignored, and we get a nation that is disconnected from our national identity, and with a population with rose-coloured views of what Australia is. But creativity, it has the potential to change this and change it for good, because creativity, as what's been shared with you this afternoon, it can be a powerful part of the solution. But in our case, we're looking at it as reawakening our curiosity in ourselves and in others, and strengthening our collective sense of self. So it's not only by unlearning the untruths, but thinking in new and creative ways that can make Australia a better place for everyone. Simply unlearning the untruths. So we look at a quote from Marcia Langton. Australia is alive with a long history of the Indigenous people, our culture and our presence. So how do we do this using the power of creativity to change a national identity? Because it's something that we can all do every day, starting from right now. It can be as simple as being more open to the environment around us. It can be easy as exploring cultures we haven't explored before. It can be finding out whose lands, whose country we are on, and acknowledging and paying respects to the rightful owners. It can be questioning what we have learnt about Australia's history and finding out about what we haven't. The diversity and creativity can do wonders for improving our national identity. Being proud of one's national identity can promote creativity depending on how it is conceptualised. So to put it another way, love for one's country or culture can boost creativity. It's a self-perpetuating cycle. But what does this do to our national identity when we use creativity to celebrate and promote Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander cultures? Quite simply, it enriches it. It elevates it. It connects it to the story of a nation that's the envy of the world. If Australia is going to project its national identity as one belonging to a confident nation with a unique history, Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples and achievements must be a significant part of our story. 65,000 years deserves multiple volumes, not just a simple footnote. But it's not just Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people who can benefit. When we are empowered and thriving, the whole of Australia benefits too. Creating better and more equitable social outcomes contributes to building a robust and connected community and a thriving economy, and at that point, every Australian wins. But while it's easy for us to talk about it here today, there are still many hurdles to overcome if our national identity is to become a true reflection of Australia's history. Now, despite the majority of Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islanders thriving in Australia, there remains systemic disadvantages across health, justice, education, employment, and other areas. So understanding the factors that promote creative thinking amongst people in different cultures is very important in the hopes that we can all work together to tackle the challenges Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people still face. So it'll take everyone and everything from governments, organisations and individuals to act. So what's stopping us right here and right now? A quote from Loicha O'Donoghue: "Together we can build a remarkable country, the envy of the rest of the world." So looking at the future, creativity has an important part to play in every aspect of our lives. Using creativity to connect with the curiosity that's within us all can help us explore all the possibilities life has to offer without fear or judgment of failure. We can use creativity to give us greater life satisfaction and meaning, improve our physical and psychological health, and give us better ways of learning and doing. It can help us grow, help us connect, help us to understand and appreciate each other. Unlearning the untruths and thinking differently is an opportunity to create a better Australia. Our country, the place we all call home, has some big decisions to make in the next few years. The wheels are already in motion on important subjects like the Uluru Statement, the Voice to Parliament, Truth-Telling and Treaty. Momentum is building for creating a more just and fair country for all. And the great news is that it's within our reach. To finalise, a quote from Uncle Bob Anderson, a Noogie elder: great things happen when good people come together. And just as I started with this brand mark, we're thinking about how this is relevant to us all. Thinking about sharing knowledge, learning, celebrating and educating the Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people. And where we're doing that in language, we simply say today, translated in Waka Waka language, to Kalimba. Thank you very much.
David, I was wondering if one of the untruths we might want to think about is the way we think about creativity. If we look at Aboriginal ways of thinking, is it as an individual, expressive act, as, you know, mainstream Australia often thinks of it, or something different?
Well, I can only think individually, as an individual myself, but I think putting Indigenous perspectives and doing things with an Indigenous terms of reference, doing things on our terms, not conforming to mainstream Australia to say, this is what it needs to be, because everyone benefits when you can bring that perspective of 60,000 years of knowledge into that creative process to allow whatever that may be is an opportunity that is only happening, you know, in the last, 10, 20 years or so, but everybody benefits from that.
I was thinking of Tyson Yunkaporta's writings about, you know, just changing the way you think and having to take on board whole new ways of thinking. And maybe this is something that ad agencies are already doing, kind of thinking of it as a collective effort, creativity. Is that something you'd like to see more of?
Yeah, certainly. I mean, we've been involved with a number of agencies around in terms of bringing an Indigenous perspective or Indigenous voice into the creative process. And look, that's been a great opportunity to collaborate with other agencies. And in other cases, there are frustrations too, because when you're talking about deadlines and budgets and all the rest of it, as we all know, there is a certain way of being and doing from an Aboriginal perspective that aren't tied to deadlines as what the Western world tends to see. So it's that education process to not only the agencies that we work with, but also the clients itself. And once you run on Indigenous terms of reference, the outcomes are better, not only for the project, but for the community at large.
Well, I look forward to those changes in capitalism coming any day now, David. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Cheers.
You're going to hear next from the agency that won the Rigg Design Prize this year. Emma Montgomery is the CEO of Leo Burnett, multi-award-winning agency, and their campaign explores our baser emotions. Very exciting. It's called Can Creativity Make You Bleed?
Hi, I feel like Madonna. So, I do, obviously. So, I love this topic. What is the potential of creativity to shape Australia's future? And I'm a bit of a nerd, so I started thinking about the future. And when we think about the future, we tend to have a bit of a sense of it being something that comes at us at speed. So I went and stuck it into DALL-E. So this is an open AI version of what does shaping the future look like. And it looks like this. It looks very like sci-fi, but it doesn't look like the world that we know today. That's because, so much of when we think about the future, it is about change and about speed. So Justin Trudeau in the World Economic Forum at Davos a couple of years ago said this great quote, "The pace of change has never been this fast, yet it will never be this slow again." Scary stuff. Even scarier, he said this in 2018. Justin, COVID, dude. Like, we hadn't even gotten into unprecedented times when everything around us fundamentally changed. And there's a great book called The Future is Faster Than You Think, all about the convergence of technology and its relationship to all different parts of our life. And they coin this idea of the acceleration of acceleration, which makes you feel a bit anxious, right? And the thing about the acceleration of acceleration, when you think about it through a technology lens, is it infiltrates everything. From we're living longer, where our healthcare is different, our whole world has fundamentally shifted. And we see that. We saw a huge change of where we live, people going in and changing what regions look like, how we work is fundamentally different, all the way down to maybe we'll never have money again, which is great because I never have money. But it's kind of just one lens on what the future actually looks like. Because the truth is, and David talked to this a little bit, when it comes to future progress, Australia can also be frustratingly stagnant or glacially slow, frankly. And you look at some of those big things that underpin change and underpin our future as a nation, and they don't fucking move. The gender pay gap. Oh yeah, here we are, but we're still there. Climate, we're still talking about climate change. We're in climate crisis now. And we know that First Nations health is significantly worse than our population. And yet we just these are fundamental things to our future, but they just carry on. And I guess that's because we're pretty happy with incrementalism. But there's another way. And this is the belief of our agency, and it's the belief of many of my colleagues here tonight, which is that creativity has the power to transform human behaviour. That's our superpower. It's perspective change, because a lot of those really glacially slow things require us to look at things from a different perspective, to change beliefs, biases, and behaviours, not to change fundamental structures of how things are done. So that's the point of our exhibition, which is all about Can Creativity Make You Bleed?, which is attacking another glacially slow problem of blood donation in Australia. 3% of the population give blood, and the real kind of challenge is that people think somebody else is going to do it for them, and so we don't act. And so that glacially slow problem stays the same. So we've been looking at how do different emotions, how can they elicit that change in perspective that will get you to finally act, from the framing of fear, putting blood in the scarcity of blood in the context of what happens when it runs out, of retelling and reframing the perspective of what happens when you give blood through joy, of the sadness of all of the stories behind where your individual blood goes, from anger that there are more flat earthers in Australia than there are frickin' blood donors, and disgust, shining a light on the blood drinking community of Australia to say, look, they can get blood, but we can't get it. And so look, all of this is giving us some perspective, and we're learning from this in terms of how people are interacting. And it turns out, Australia, we are disgusting. But what's interesting for us is that creative potential has actually helped us look at this in a new light. We don't normally think about, let's do a disgusting campaign when we want you to give us blood. We do fear, we do scarcity, we talk about what's going to happen when it's gone. But sometimes looking at things from another angle is the thing that we need to really change perspectives. But this was never about blood to us. This is about the possibility of what happens when you change minds. So I'm going to leave you with this tonight. I'm a bit of a geek, and so I went and read the budget. And so the federal government, lots of glacially slow problems in the federal budget. 79 times they refer to the word future. How many times do they refer to the word creativity? So we look to the answers to these problems in the same way, the same time, forever. But this is what we need. We need a perspective change, not amongst us, the believers, but amongst those people out there. Thank you.
I'm a bit disturbed by the amount of times that the word vomit has already been used tonight, and we still have several speakers to go. what does this mean for ads if we are so highly motivated by disgust? What are we going to be seeing on our screens in the future?
Well, I mean, the creatives who created it are here tonight. I think humour. I mean, we need new ways to see things. If we keep getting told, oh my God, this is bad, and we talk about, particularly with not-for-profits, sort of the fatigue of all of the compassion fatigue. We just need people to see things in a different light, and perhaps that'll make us sort of change behaviour. So.
Well, and it's a trick, isn't it? How to do that? You mentioned anxiety. I was like, hello. How do you get around people's anxiety to motivate them without having a kind of opium for the masses situation where you're just giving people a sop to our need for comfort?
I mean, definitely, there is no one silver bullet to anything. And so probably what we're learning is there's actually multiple threads that you can pull. And that's one of the benefits of creativity is, everything gets stagnant if you've seen it before. You need new, different ways to see things for us to really start to see what the possibility is.
Compelling arguments for the continued existence of ads. Thank you. Eloise Liley is co-head of planning at TBWA. Their campaign is called Everything Grows with Creativity, and I'm fairly sure it's the first time that we've seen RBA and ABS data with a cephalopod, but you guys would know better than me. Eloise, welcome.
I actually wanted to start tonight just by saying thank you so much for coming on down, and thank you to Telstra and to NGV for having TBWA here tonight. It's amazing. It has been amazing, the whole process. Look, what is the value of creativity and why is it overlooked? This was the topic of the brief that we answered in my kind of short synopsis. But I think what we took out of this is this idea of growth, right? And when we think about growth, we've heard it tonight, growth is a really hot topic. We hear it in our client meetings, in every boardroom. We hear it in every business that we enter into. And we're especially hearing it right now in the economy as we face into 2023. But I think in answering this brief, what we couldn't help but notice was that the value of creativity is often not there in terms of the discussion of our national growth, right? It's missing from that topic. And that got us thinking. And we kept coming back to this quote. Edward de Bono is a famous psychologist. We've all heard about him, no doubt. But he said that there is no doubt that creativity is the most important human resource of all. That without creativity, there would be no progress. So if there's no creativity, we don't grow, essentially, right? And that's pretty interesting in the Australian economic context. There's been a little kind of snapshot. There is some data coming up, but it's fun. But I think when you're looking at the economic context in Australia, what we've always talked about from an economic perspective is what we can get from sheep or what we can dig out of the ground. Rarely do we talk about creativity in Australia, and rarely do we perceive it as a financial or economic resource. And I think that's the thing that we need to start to flip. Because we should, right? People much smarter than me, of course, the ad lady is standing on a stage talking about the value of creativity, but I think we need to listen to some people outside of advertising as well. PwC Australia has shown that for Australia, unless we start to adopt creativity in a widespread form across our economy, our global ranking will drop from the 13th largest economy to the 29th, right? And that's going to happen in a matter of years. UNESCO has also pointed out that the lack of creative application over the last few years, if we think of all the upheaval that we've all been through, don't need to mention it, that's actually taken $750 billion US off the global economy. That's a lot of money. And so we clearly have a problem here, right? But what if we started to challenge it? What if we looked at the medium of advertising to try and change that conversation, to get people to reframe the value of creativity overall? What if we then went one step further and took the measures that we most value in our economic discussion, yes, the RBA data that's about to come up, and we looked at that through the lens of creativity? What would that look like? What would that challenge people to think? Well, it could challenge people to take more risks. And I'm not talking about creative accounting. I'm talking about taking risks in terms of how do we find new forms of growth? How do we improve our GDP in new measures? Could that be in terms of different ways of dwelling investment, something that we need, or something in terms of consumption? How do we create more sustainable measures within that? In taking risks, like our tightroper here, maybe we would find new forms of growth in that way. Or maybe we could find new ways for government expenditure. Perhaps that could be a little bit more empathetic in some areas that need it most, like the warm hug of our octopus, right? But I think most of all, what could happen is that we could give rise to new forms of outputs, new forms of growth in areas like we need it most, right? Health, finance, construction, housing. All of these measures use the same things every year. We see them time and time again. The budget is a big one, but they come out monthly. And I think when we're looking at this, what we're challenging here is how can we use creativity to create a different point of view and show that with creativity, everything can grow. Because if we do, we could actually encourage more people to re-look at the value of creativity in Australia. We could get them to look at what it could do for our economy. We could even get them to participate in it more on a daily basis as individuals, as they have done on our wall. This is part of the activation at the exhibition, if you haven't seen it. It filled up in 2 weeks, which we were quite surprised about. But give people stickers and they will stick. But I think in closing, what we can do if we start to change this and we enable participation, we create methods or we get people to reframe what creativity could be, particularly in an economic context, we can get people to reframe the value of creativity overall. We can show that it can be a force multiplier for our economy and that it is, in fact, our greatest human resource, not just for now, not just for 2023, but for beyond. Thank you so much.
What would it look like if governments did this, if they recognised creativity? What kind of new projects or re-evaluations or initiatives might we see?
Octopus is unleashed. Look, I think what we were posing was how do we look at an imaginative kind of way, or what are the different creative applications that we could do to rethink things? So I think the output of that would be a whole heap of innovation, new diverse solutions to problems. We've heard a lot about the potential for creative problem solving tonight. And I think that's the kind of thing that we're challenging and that you would hope that you would see if government adopted this. But I think, I have a lot of heart with what Emma was just saying. We need people to be thinking about it that are not just in this room, but on a more national scale in all areas. It's not just something that is the domain of advertising, I think.
Is this something we could see put into a wellbeing index, which seems to be the direction the government's looking at now?
Yeah, 100%. I think there's all different factors. I mean, we're talking about the budget, right? There's many different problems that we could fix, and I think wellbeing is one of them. Shout out to things like equal pay as well. But yeah, I completely agree.
Yep, we're problem rich. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Steve O'Farrell is co-founder and managing partner of the Royals. At just over a decade old, I think that probably makes them ideally well placed to look at the problem of creativity in an unbelievably quickly changing world. Steve, welcome.
Thanks, Hilary, and hi, everyone. Look, I hope you don't mind, but I'm actually not going to spend the next 5 minutes talking about the potential of creativity to shape Australia's future, because to be honest, it feels a bit like, in a forum like this anyway, talking about the effects of climate change, which we all agree on, right? It's a huge amount of potential. I think what my time is better off spent doing is talking about how we can actually maximise creativity instead. So rather than asking what creativity can do for Australia, instead I'm kind of going to do a JFK on it and ask the question of what Australia and what all of us can do for creativity. And when you look into the research in this area, there's a stack of really great info out there, going back all the way to Richard Dawkins and his meme theory in the early 70s. And what they talk about is a concept that you may have heard of, but I'm hoping after the next 5 minutes you're not going to forget, and that is the concept of idea sex. So for those of you who haven't heard about the concept of idea sex is based on the idea that ideas meet and mate and ultimately propagate in a similar way to how people meet and mate and ultimately have babies. And it's fair to say that over the course of the last, couple of years, COVID has been the equivalent of the world's biggest buzzkill. So let's take a look at the first half of the idea sex equation. That's the meeting part. So that's the thought that people need to be exposed to other cultures, people from different disciplines, if they're going to achieve their full creative potential. And there's stacks of great historical reference for this, starting probably most notably with the Renaissance, right? 1400 to 1700 AD, where a swathe of people who had never met before got together from all sorts of different cultures and backgrounds, and as a result, created stuff that has fundamentally changed the world forever, like the printing press, for example. Or a more recent example is how rapidly Silicon Valley developed versus Route 128 back in the 50s, in the second half of last century. For those of you who aren't familiar with Route 128 in Massachusetts, at one stage last century, it was lauded to be the next great digital hub for the world. And of course, it's been outstripped by Silicon Valley, not because Silicon Valley had access to considerably better resources or ideas, but because it was a much better connected social ecosystem. So much so, they had places like the Wagon Wheel, which was a famous watering hole where Silicon Valley engineers would hang out during the week and have too many beers. And inevitably, the flow of lubrication, giving up the secrets that they all knew, would flow. And as a result, innovation rapidly progressed and turned Silicon Valley into, obviously, the place that we all know it is today. Or, as Joseph Henrich from Harvard says in his book, The Secret of Our Success, when it comes to human prosperity, it's better to be social than smart. Now let's look at part B of that idea sex equation. That's the meeting, or the recombining of ideas bit. And I say recombining because so often, particularly with the universal access to information that we all have, creativity is not so much about seeing something new, it's about seeing something familiar in a new way. Now, artistic inspirations all around us. We're at the NGV, we're well familiar with it, but that doesn't mean that examples in business are any less creative. Like when the Kroc brothers took inspiration from Ford assembly lines, applied it to the quick service restaurant industry and created McDonald's. Or when Travis Kalanick and his co-founders took location-based data, demand-based pricing, smartphone technology, applied it to the taxi industry to create, in those days it was UberCab, or Uber, as we know and kind of sometimes love today. Bottom line is, Australia's future is going to be shaped by those people who can transcend the disciplines in which they specialise and have the ability to mentally flex between fields. Because this idea of, or concept of idea sex may sound like a little bit of fun, but the science that it comes from is all empirically based and stuff that we can act on now. So how can we, to my original question, go back and maximise creativity's benefits for all Australians? We can do things like establish broader and deeper connections with people from different cultures. And yes, David, that should absolutely start with our First Nations people, the oldest living culture on Earth. We should diversify where we get our ideas from and how we discuss our ideas. We should kind of build out our idea hookup networks, if you want to extend the idea sex metaphor that one step further. We should learn by doing. So learn a new hobby. The more creative, the better. Some of you may not be aware that Nobel laureates are actually twice as likely to play a musical instrument and 7 times more likely to paint, draw, or sculpt. And of course, all this speaks to the need to get back to funding artistic and cultural institutions at significant levels. Because the link between creativity and society's psychological, economic, and social well-being is absolutely undeniable. And if we can do all that, then the idea sex, not to mention Australia's future, will be absolutely fantastic. Thank you. Oh, sorry, I had one more little surprise slide I totally forgot about. This is a little giveaway that we've made for tonight from the Royals. Thanks to our clients at Wild Secrets. I'd encourage you to explore that website if you haven't already. It's a little bottle of Idea Lube, special Rigg Design Prize edition. Please help yourself. If you're looking for some creative inspiration on the way out, take one bottle or even two, okay? Thank you, everyone.
I was really trying to come up with something based on idea contraception, but I can't, so we'll just let that go. How are we going to do this? Are we going to have some kind of idea speed dating, creativity, hookup meets? What?
Yeah, great question. Look, I think there's a lot happening, and this is a fantastic reminder. I mean, this is idea sex in the making, right? Of people getting off Zoom, people coming together and meeting and exchanging thoughts and challenging the way that we think about problems. And in particular, learning to empathise with one another, which of course is the definition of being human and something that we could all get better at. Hopefully I summed up most of those key points in the slide, but really it's about encouraging ourselves to challenge our existing beliefs and get together more to help collectively solve problems together.
Anything I say now is just going to have awkward metaphors, so let's stop. Thank you, Steph.
Thanks, everyone.
Our final speaker for the night is Annabelle Begin, creative copywriter at Tinkerbell, and they're kind of a triple threat. You probably know last year they were named Creative Agency of the Year, Full Service Agency of the Year and PR Agency of the Year by Mumbrella, first agency to win all three. Their campaign, I'm really looking forward to this, is called Invaluable Scratchy. Annabelle, welcome.
Cool. You've all been sitting here for ages, so I'm going to keep it really short and sweet. And I'm going to start just by saying that humans are instinctively creative beings. 2 million years ago, our creativity was the thing that allowed us to find new food sources and create new tools and progress our species in a way that no other creature had done before and none have done since. Most historians and scientists will tell you that our creativity is the thing that sets us apart from other animals. We and we alone are able to ponder kind of the origins of the universe and the meaning of life. We have the ability to create complex, imagined alternate realities and create systems of belief that unite us beyond any blood or tribal relation, which is not something that any other species does, and it is what's kind of allowed us to build the kind of empires that we have today. Despite this being incredibly fundamental in who we are and how we got here, modern Australia places very little value on creativity today. A number of forces work actively against our creative nature. Until June this year, we had no federal minister for the arts, as evidenced by years of ongoing budget cuts to the creative industries and a dismal lack of support for creatives during the pandemic that shall not be named. And it's something that is obviously the reason why we're all here to chat about it tonight. But creativity is persistent. It's something that, despite all of the challenges raised against it, it finds a way to exist, which is why we kind of find creativity in all places. The human brain is hardwired to creatively problem solve, regardless of the industry or the job title that you have. It's why we kind of figure out how to make a paycheck last for the entire month or the last kind of $250 last year the week when you haven't done so well. It's what allows us to find a route through the back streets when the traffic's really bad in peak hour. And it's what lets us come up with really great excuses to not go to the weekend plans that we don't want to go to. And since creativity finds a way, we find it everywhere. We find it in our backyards. We find it in our wallets. We find it in our bathrooms, and even our hardware stores. And I think if you ask me, working a hot snack into a DIY experience is pure creative genius. We find it in our farms, we find it in our hospitals, and we find it on our aircrafts. Every single one of these, which were the highlight of our Rigg Design response at Thinkable, is an example of Australian creativity in action, and each one is absolutely fundamental in the way that we live our lives today. The other thing that might not sound as life-changing as a Bunnings snag or a goon bag, but has the same kind of ability to harness creativity to drive social change is, of course, advertising. I'd be remiss not to talk about it, but advertising, as so many of the speakers have said tonight, is an example of how we take creative problem solving and use it to drive behaviour. If I say not happy Jan or Rhonda and Katut, every single Australian person in this room will know what I'm talking about. And we love, funny lines and costumes, but advertising is kind of case in point for how tangible the impact of creativity can be. Advertising accounts for up to 65% of Australia's GDP. And I think, as we all know, the higher the GDP, the better the standard of living. And the better the standard of living, the greater the potential of people to harness their creative nature. As Daniel kind of mentioned before, maybe film and literature loves a starving artist archetype, but it does work a lot better when you're not so worried about how you're going to live. Creativity and economics have a totally mutually beneficial kind of cyclical relationship. They feed each other inherently. And as DDB kind of touched on, every single business trading on the ASX today is a creative business, whether they would define themselves as one or not. I would argue that the ability of humans to find infinite ways to make money on a planet with finite resources, which we've depleted to high hub, is a kind of testament to the power of creativity as a whole. I'm just going to leave you tonight with this clip, which is a short clip of a much longer clip of one of the rare pieces of footage we have of the capital of North Korea, which seems like a really random segue from here. But the reason that I want to talk to it is creativity and capitalism are often kind of seen as opposing forces, and advertising obviously sits at the kind of intersection of the two. But when we step outside of the world that we know and we look at an environment like this, where you've kind of got streets devoid of advertising, save for political propaganda. You've got business buildings that are uniform in kind of size and shape and colour and style, even cars that are uniform in make and model. You start to think about what the world might look like if it didn't have creativity as expressed through businesses and that kind of freedom. Allowing it to flourish across sectors is really what shapes our country to be what it is, and what allows us to kind of what continues to define us as we grow and change. And I think that when you start to think about it that way, the relationship between creativity and capitalism and economics all becomes much warmer. And I don't think it's too far of a stretch to say that creativity is really the cornerstone of modern democracy and societies like Australia. It's inextricably linked to economics. It's intrinsically human, and it's completely and utterly invaluable. Thank you.
I have no power to judge anything, but you guys had the best video. It had fake mustaches, it had swearing, it had the
word... I'll live that down.
The word vainglorious. It was like Word Nerd Award from me. Excellent. How important is play in sparking creativity and getting people motivated?
It's so important. I think a huge part of our exhibit, if you haven't seen it, is interactivity, and we gave the public an opportunity to scratch. And I think creativity, we see it early on with kids in play, the imagination and drawing and all of those things that you do instinctively regardless of your kind of culture or your socioeconomic upbringing. That's kind of where creativity starts. And so encouraging play, I'm sure if you work in an advertising industry, we make all kinds of excuses to go to the movies and play pool and do fun things, but it is integral in kind of supporting that creative thinking process and the output that comes from it.
Well, and I love the idea of making creativity a kind of more intangible, invaluable thing, but do you need to put a dollar sign on it so that politicians will invest in it?
I think putting a dollar sign on it's definitely one way, and I think that for us it was less about, where do you draw that line, more about coming down to the core of it and saying that creativity does live in everything. It is inextricably linked. It's not something where you can draw a limit and say this company is, this company isn't, this action is, this action isn't. You know, it's a core of who we are as humans, and so it's a core of everything we do. And, you know, perhaps we're used to thinking in dollar terms, but we would all benefit from kind of reframing and saying creativity isn't this thing that sits over here in a gallery. It's everything, and it needs to be nurtured in every human being.
Excellent. Annabelle, thank you.
Thank you.
Is creativity the axe for the frozency inside us? I'm going to let you guys be the judge. But I want to say a huge thank you to all the speakers here tonight. A huge thank you for you for coming out on a night that looked very, very dodgy earlier today. Go you. And despite the really very high body count, I feel like tonight was mainly about hope. You know, there's that little spark of motivation in all of us, and I think these guys have uncovered it wonderfully. The lube is optional, I want to make that very clear, but whether or not you do engage in idea sex tonight, I hope it's been a spark for your creative thinking. Thank you so much.